A very good afternoon to all of you who have logged in today for the webinar that we are conducting. The subject matter being a new reality, virtual board meetings and annual general meetings, compliance and adoption. It truly is going to be a very interesting session that we are going to have today. This session is currently organized by the Federation of IT Industry Sri Lanka in association with SIMA and Colombo Stock Exchange. Our event partner for today's session is SoftLogic and Dell Technologies. And our partners, platform partner is /Tech Labs, messaging partner Textware, print media partner Dell Daily FT, and just to mention on all our corporate partners, Asiata Digital Labs, Lanka Bell, LK Domain, Luna Labs, Oral IT, Sarva Colombo, and Zillion. Thank you very much to all these partners. I would also now like to take this opportunity to describe our very eminent list of panelists and speakers that we have today. I would like to thank them for their time and their contribution towards this, which I'm sure is going to be, we've got a very exciting few hours ahead of us. We have as our moderator today Mr. Asita Talwata, Chairman, Management Systems Private Limited, who will be moderating this event. And in terms of the line of speakers, we first have Dr. Harsha Cabral, Chairman, Tokyo Cement, and Director, BOI Sri Lanka. Following Dr. Harsha Cabral, we have Renuka Vijayawardena. Mr. Renuka Vijayawardena is the Chief Regulatory Officer for Colombo Stock Exchange. And following Mr. Renuka, we will be having Mr. Jayantha Fernando, Director and Legal Advisor, ICTA, Director, Sri Lanka CERT, and Chairman of LK Domain Registry. So it's promising to be a very exciting event. We've also got Wellington Pereira online to give us the technical briefing as well today. And I can assure you it's going to be a very promising evening today. What I would also like to say, is that COVID-19 has disrupted our way of life. Who would have thought, we would have such over 500 professionals who have registered for this event to be logging in or using a Zoom session, or even in this case, it's a Microsoft Teams session on a Saturday evening. So things have changed, people have changed, and how we operate has changed. So today's session is all about how organizations actually adapt to another level of change. Let me just quickly touch on FITIS a little bit. Federation of IT Industry represents all elements of the ICT sector of Sri Lanka. We represent all the system integrators and all the hardware vendors. We represent all the software development companies. We represent all the communication or the telcos and other communication companies. We represent all the professionals. We represent all the education and training for ICT companies, as well as we also represent the newly stated all the new digital platforms that actually have been providing a yeoman service during the lockdown and during the pandemic. So that's a little bit about FITIS. And I would like to say our core mandate essentially is to lead and to drive digital transformation within Sri Lanka, to see how we could actually move Sri Lanka towards a digital nation. The value and the benefits of a digital nation are, I think, vast. I'm not going to discuss that today, but it's definitely a milestone that I believe is very important to Sri Lanka as a country. Let me just very quickly, briefly touch a few key dimensions as to what I feel is important as prerequisites for today's session. So just to give you an idea of how organizations have kind of what has changed during the pandemic. What is the change that we are seeing? We are seeing that first of all the dimensions of corporates have changed. The strategies have to change, adapt accordingly, and we need to make those adjustments. The second point is that digital adoption is not something, or digitalizing your organization is not something which is nice to have anymore. If you're not adapted to digital today, I find that you'll find it very difficult to do business hereafter or in the future. And definitely the last point that I would like to say is that people have changed. There is no doubt about it, right? When we say people, we are talking about our own customers, we are talking about all our stakeholders, including our shareholders, as well as we are talking about the general public, from aspects of how they prioritize themselves, how they actually purchase patterns. Everything has changed since. So this is the new normal. That's something that is important to keep in mind. The next point that I would like to quickly touch on is today's subject. Why is it so important that you actually have virtual board meetings and have virtual AGMs well and do it well? Why do you successfully do it? Because to our shareholders, to our stakeholders, it's a message. It's a very strong message that you're portraying, that you are ready to adapt. You are digitally savvy. Your organization is digitally ready to act and has the necessary skills to be able to adapt digital to, which is absolutely critical to be able to function anymore during this period. And last of all, it builds faith in your organization, the investors. It builds faith within the investors in your organization. Just one last point that I would also like to touch on before passing it on to our eminent panel is that, why not actually just, AGMs have conventionally not been really too important in the sense of PR, public relations. So why not actually make this, logistically conventional AGMs have actually, been not really taken as PR by some organizations. But why not? I mean, those logistical challenges have actually can be overcome through virtual AGMs. So, I mean, why not take this opportunity? Like a lot of the associations like FITIS, actually, AGMs are one of the most important PR exercises within our calendar. So why not for most other public sector companies as well? Why not make this? Why not showcase your achievements throughout the year during this? Why not actually, showcase what is your contribution to society in terms of CSR, in terms of environment? And last of all, why not kind of take this opportunity to bring in some global experts, which we can do on a virtual meeting, to talk about, show how your strength globally, to show your understanding about global trends. Why not bring in your subject area or in your area of expertise, why not bring in a global speaker who can actually, add some value to your shareholders, building that confidence of all the shareholders. So instead of trying to target for maybe a fraction of your shareholders being at the AGM, why not use this opportunity to actually bring a vast majority of shareholders and prospective shareholders onto this forum? So with that, I leave you with some thoughts, and before we move on to the technicality of it. And with that, I would like to now pass on this to Mr. Asita Talvatte, who will take it on to moderate this event and take it on from here. So over to you, Asita. Thank you very much.
Abbas. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to moderate this session. And thank you firstly for the immense interest shown. Abbas has given a lot of the background. Post-COVID, the inability for management teams, for boards of directors to get together and discuss decisions, challenges during that period, and also regular business issues. And more so the annual general meetings, which is now a challenge in terms of how does one set about having these annual general meetings in this current context. Now we have an eminent panel, as was explained. Just to briefly put you in the picture on the topics, the first topic of discussion, so there will be 4 presentations which will take about 40 minutes, and thereafter we'll have another 40 minutes or so of Q&A, taking us through to 5:30, 5:40 approximately. So the first presentation will be on legal provisions relating to virtual board meetings and virtual AGMs. This will be presented by Dr. Harsha Cabral. As all of you know, Dr. Cabral is chairman of Tokyo Cement, has been serves on many PLC boards, and he was instrumental in drafting the Companies Act of 2007, and therefore very well equipped to deal with this topic. The second topic is on the CSC guidelines on this particular area and other regulations relating to relevant to the topic. And we'll introduce the speaker later on, that's Renuka Vijayawardena. The third area is on Electronic Transactions Act and the electronic signatures and admissibility in law. This will be dealt with by Mr. Jayanta Fernando. And finally, the fourth presentation by Wellington Pereira, who will talk of the operational and technical aspects of using the different apps in this process. So with those few opening remarks, make one other comment that while the panelists have been kind enough to present their views on this. We would like to make an opening statement that the opinions and given they are of their own, and any decision taken by companies would be urged to be taken in consultation with the company's respective legal advisors. Renuka Vijayawardena. Renuka, as all of you know, is the Chief Regulatory Officer of the Colombo Stock Exchange, involved in formulating strategy, regulatory policy, supervision of stockbrokers, PLCs, and of course of enforcement. Renuka will clarify the guidelines issued by the CSC recently on the topic of virtual AGMs and discuss other relevant matters in relation to virtual meetings and so on. Renuka, over to you, please. Thank you firstly for the immense interest shown. Abbas has given a lot of the background. Post-COVID, the inability for management teams, for boards of directors to get together and discuss decisions, challenges during that period, and also regular business issues. And more so the annual general meetings, which is now a challenge in terms of how does one set about having these annual general meetings in this current context. Now we have an eminent panel, as was explained. Just to briefly put you in the picture on the topics, the first topic of discussion, so there will be 4 presentations, which will take about 40 minutes, and thereafter we'll have another 40 minutes or so of Q&A, taking us through to 5:30, 5:40 approximately. So the first presentation will be on legal provisions relating to virtual board meetings and virtual AGMs. This will be presented by Dr. Harsha Cabral. As all of you know, Dr. Cabral is chairman of Tokyo Cement, has been serves on many PLC boards, and he was instrumental in drafting the Companies Act of 2007, and therefore very well equipped to deal with this topic. The second topic is on the CSC guidelines on this particular area and other regulations relating to relevant to the topic. And we'll introduce the speaker later on. That's Renuka Vijayawardena. The third area is on Electronic Transactions Act and the electronic signatures and admissibility in law. This will be dealt with by Mr. Jayanta Fernando. And finally, the fourth presentation by Wellington Pereira, who will talk of the operational and technical aspects of using the different apps in this process. So with those few opening remarks, I would like to call on Dr. Cabral to make his presentation, and just make one other comment that while the panelists have been kind enough to present their views on this, we would like to make an opening statement that the opinions and given they are of their own, and any decision taken by companies would be urged to be taken in consultation with the company's respective legal advisors. That would be Renuka Vijayawardena. Renuka, as all of you know, is the Chief Regulatory Officer of the Colombo Stock Exchange, involved in formulating strategy, regulatory policy, supervision of stockbrokers, PLCs, and of course of enforcement. Renuka will clarify the guidelines issued by the CSC recently on the topic of virtual AGMs and discuss other relevant matters in relation to virtual meetings and so on. Renuka, over to you, please.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Before I get into the guideline that we have issued, just a few words on the relating to the background, which basically resulted in us doing this document and issuing it to the listed companies. Basically, I think as Abbas very clearly said, sometimes change happens due to circumstances. It can happen due to regulations also. Now, in this instance, clearly it was due to the macro environment, the circumstances which has resulted in a lot of organizations, entities, business people, and also regulators thinking differently. Let me take you back to sort of middle of March or thereabout. Now, as you know, we don't clearly, the listing rules that we enforce is relating to the dissemination or the publication of the annual report. We do not have, the Colombo Stock Exchange do not have a specific rule with regard to the date of the AGM, unlike in markets like Singapore Exchange, for example, they have a specific rule. We don't have that. So now these companies, in fact, most of the banks which have their financial year ending 31st December, we call them December companies. So by the first week of March, they had released their annual reports. So they were by and large, they were pretty much in compliance with our rules. Then came COVID-19, right? And the lockdowns. Then all of a sudden, people were wondering what to do and all that. The AGMs were fixed for the last week of March. Most of the banks had scheduled their AGMs during that period. So everyone was wondering what to do, and a lot of queries were made from us, as it happens usually, because when there's a problem, the listed companies approach us. Then we did two things. Initially, we wrote to the registrar of companies, because the AGM dates and all these rules are not governed by us, as I said earlier. It's set out in the company law, Companies Act. So we wrote to them, we wrote to ROC, and we asked two things. One is about whether ROC could extend the date of, the AGM. The date of whether the registrar of companies could extend the date And so then he very politely said that the law does not provide for him to give waivers. So that's correct. Then what we did was we did research. A lot of actually listed companies, even law firms, they were asking whether we could come up with a guideline. So in response to that, we looked at some other markets. In most of the markets, it's the regulatory bodies and even the government that issues these regulations. So we put together this document and issued it to the listed companies around about the 3rd week of March. So that's the background. And if I may take you through very quickly some of these provisions, we very clearly said when we publish this guideline, it is not a rule. It is not to be sort of strictly enforced by us like listing rules. And it is just a guideline and it should be understood in that spirit. And also, we strictly advise listed companies to obtain appropriate legal advice in determining the most appropriate arrangement that they think regarding the conduct of an AGM. I need to very clearly mention that, because there are lots of legal issues as we go along. We'll discuss some of these. We have Harsha also. So what were the options we had? Now, there was no time to deliberate on the methodologies, the manner in which AGM should be held, postponed. So we were in around about 20th of March or 25th of March. So we said we can suggest a few options. First one is, of course, think of postponing the AGM. But they had already, as I said, already scheduled the AGM to the last week of March. So when you are postponing the AGM, of course, notice has to be given to us. And when you are rescheduling it, we said that a supplementary notice also should be necessary. And there was another issue relating to AGMs, because as you know, most of the companies, they pay the final dividend with the AGM. It's tied to the shareholder approval at the AGM. So because of that, when the AGM does not happen, the final dividend also can't take place. So that was a big issue. And at that time, we were not able to figure out how long this was going to take. It could have taken a couple of weeks, 1 month, 2 months, as it happened. So we said that in the guideline, we said that you could even consider giving an interim dividend in lieu of the final dividend. Normally, we don't allow cancellation of dividends. We don't do that. We have never done it. But due to the unprecedented scenario, we said that we could think of giving the opportunity to listed companies to convert the final dividend to interim dividend, because there's no prejudice to anybody. Of course, we were very conscious about one thing: adequate notice has to be given to the market. You can't just convert it and pay. When you say market, we go by market days. So market days are trading days. And then came the problem that we were closed for a long period. After 20th of March, we opened on 11th of May. So during that period, there were no trading days. So maybe because of that, a lot of companies did not go ahead with that. Then the second option was, of course, our topic for today. We suggested that companies could think of having the AGM virtual AGMs. And that would be a very novel concept in Sri Lanka. But although it's a novel concept in Sri Lanka, in most of the other markets, it is not. Because if I give an example, the S&P 500 companies, which are comprised of companies listed in various markets in US, they usually have AGMs virtually. And the best part is, now I checked out around about last week, usually their rate of having virtual AGMs is about 10 to 11%. Now this year, about 70% of the companies in the S&P index, they have either announced virtual AGMs or they have had the virtual AGMs. So that shows that everybody's changing and basically getting adjusted to the new normal, as Abbas very clearly said. So virtual AGMs will achieve a lot of objectives, lots of benefits to the shareholders, and also it will enable the company to comply with the restrictions imposed by the government in terms of social distancing, etc. Then the third option was to have a hybrid AGM. That is, you have a mix of both, a physically arranged AGM as well as a virtual component. Already, a lot of banks have announced that, and a lot of banks have announced that, and also some banks are going for a total virtual AGM also. Now, this will enable the company to conduct the AGM with minimal physical presence of the shareholders. That's the advantage, right? And of course, adequate notice will have to be given. Then the fourth item that we mentioned was companies can encourage shareholders to use the proxies. They can tell them to vote by proxy by choosing to include the specific provisions in the notice of meeting. But we also said that in instances like that, maybe companies could say that the shareholders can appoint an independent director. It's not a must. They could consider appointing an independent director to be the proxy as a best practice. Then we also spoke about the questions to be raised by shareholders at the AGM. Now we encourage companies to basically ask the shareholders to send in questions before the AGM, right? Once the rescheduled AGM is the notice is published, they could encourage them to come up with questions. Then those questions can be deliberated by the board of directors or the management at the meeting itself. And we also said that those relevant responses and of course the questions can also be minuted in the minutes of the AGM. And then finally, we also suggested a few alternate arrangements with regard to the logistics of it. Maybe very briefly, if I may say that, if I highlight some of those, basically you could, if you can't have the physical component of the meeting in one location, you could think of having it in multiple places. But of course, you need to connect both locations through maybe video links, etc., so that you will treat everybody in the same way. There will be a sort of a equal access to everybody. Then listed companies may be required to provide advance notice to shareholders to inform them on regarding the number of shareholders. Now that's very important because you can't just openly invite everybody. Some companies have 20,000 shareholders. It's not possible. So you might have to have a rough idea as to how many shareholders you might want to have, and then decide on the physical meeting component. Then listed companies can also consider requesting the shareholders to pre-register themselves or their proxies. That also be recommended. And finally, of course, as it happens everywhere else, certain health screening measures such as temperature checking and all that could also be considered by the listed company. So that's all what we said in the document. But the most important part is, I'm sure Harsha is going to very clearly explain this. We said that with regard to virtual AGMs, we clearly told them to obtain legal advice because there are all kinds of articles among listed companies. I have personally verified a few articles. Now, some articles expressly provide for this kind of meetings, and some articles might make inference to the requirement of having a physical meeting. Now, for example, there are these. I found one article in some of the companies. It says that with regard to the meeting may be held by a number of shareholders who constitute a quorum, being assembled together at the place, date, and time, etc. So that might imply that you need to have a physical component also, but it's not for the CSC to talk about these things. It's all left to Harsha to interpret it. That's why we clearly said that listed companies should obtain legal advice in this regard. That's the in brief, that's the outline of our document.
Thank you, Renuka, for the excellent presentation. So we'll take the questions at the end after all 4 presentations. And may I now call upon Harsha to proceed with his presentation? Harsha?
Yeah, thank you, Asita. Sorry for that interruption. Thank you, Renuka, for that part to come in. For the discussion today on this particular topic, I have broken it into 4 parts. Basically, what are the most important features that would impact this particular topic? Now, I know the audience, we have very many in the audience who are experts, especially the company secretaries and the registrars. They are the most knowledgeable on the subject. So please pardon me because I might go to the basics for the benefit of all the participants. So you have to excuse me if I may go down to the basics. Firstly, what you have to look at in this particular scenario is what are the issues that impact this particular virtual board meetings and annual general meetings. Now, firstly, you find the Companies Act provisions, number 1. Number 2, you have the Articles of Association. Then number 3, you have the regulator, the Colombo Stock Exchange. Renuka just spoke on behalf of the regulator. Then fourthly, the IT part of it, the Electronic Transactions Act, and the impact of the IT part of it, I believe my friend Jayanta would deal with those aspects. Now let me get back to the first part, that is the company law part, the Companies Act provisions. Now you would see, though the Companies Act has 534 sections, only 14 sections in the Companies Act deal with notices, the part of meetings and proceedings. Sections 133 to section 147 deals specifically with meetings and proceedings. One is they have been used to this type of video conferencing. Very often the participants who go abroad, and if your directors are abroad, in most of the listed companies also this happens, you find them participating, joining the meeting by way of video conferencing. Their physical presence is not there at the meeting. But then the second type of meetings, you have the members meetings or the shareholders meetings, again are twofold. One is the EGM or the extraordinary general meeting, and the other one is the AGM, the annual general meeting. So today we'll be concentrating more on the annual general meeting, and because that is the most crucial issue. But before that, I would like to just spell out what exactly the Companies Act say about the meeting. Now, from 133 to 147 in 14 sections, this aspect of meetings are covered. What are the different types of meetings? How you keep your minutes? What are the notices? What is a requisition? How is a resolution? The different types of ordinary resolution, special resolutions. All that is set out very clearly in the Companies Act in 133 to 147. But for example, 133 deals with annual general meeting. It says how and when you should hold that particular meeting. Then in how to convene a meeting. Then in 135, it specifically says the length of notice for calling meetings. Separately, in case of annual general meeting, 15 working days, then extraordinary general meeting, 10 working days, and all that is set out there. And provisions for in 136, it deals with provisions of meetings and votes, then proxies. So it's go on and it deals with all the demand of a poll and how to set about in these meetings. And it does not speak of the place of the meeting, how specific notice should be given to the shareholders. All those minute details are the ones we are now dealing with, which will be the subject matter of your own company's own articles. Now, this is if you take the macro picture in the Companies Act, the micro version of that, when the place of the meeting, how to hold, how to serve the notice, all those are in your own articles. So you must be careful looking at the articles. Now, various companies have various articles. Some, of course, adopt the first schedule to the Companies Act. There are 13 schedules. First schedule deals with the model articles. So now let's look at the model articles for a moment. Now, before that, I have to mention, when we are talking about the Companies Act, though they mentioned 133 to 147, which deals with the notice, proxy, accidental omission, minutes, so on and so forth. There's another important section you've got to look at in section 529. That's a very, very important section for this discussion. 529 defines, 529(1) defines what a document means. Document means a document in any form, including A, writing on material, B, information recorded or stored by means of a tape recorder, computer, or the device, and material subsequently derived from information so recorded or stored. So when the Companies Act was drafted, this was specially brought in, taking into consideration and knowing the electronic age we are moving into. So document is also specifically, it includes a computer generated document. Then also it's very important at a later point of time, I will be discussing that also. Under the definition 529 subsection 4, the same definition section, subsection 4 deals with a fairly important point with regard to where public notice of any matter is required to be given under this act. That notice shall be given by publishing a notice of that matter in at least one issue of the Gazette. Now again, publication of the Gazette is an issue. Then B, in at least one issue of a daily newspaper in the Sinhala, Tamil or English language circulating in the area in which. Now all these are meant for notice to be conveyed, right? So the definition is there with regard to public notice. Then in the Companies Act, in 116, it deals with location of company records, and 117(1) deals with form of records. That is all for the Companies Act, right? Provisions dealing with this particular topic. Then we come to the articles, the second point. Your own articles of your organization will spell out very carefully the minute details of holding meetings, where to hold the meeting, how to hold the meeting, what notice to be given, how it is to be given, place of meeting, so on and so forth. Now, since we have so many companies having different articles, I would draw your attention to the first schedule of the Companies Act, which deals with the model articles. Right? First schedule is set out the model articles. Now, in the model articles, your companies might have similar ones, or different companies will have different articles, but this gives a fairly good guideline of the topic we are talking about today. Articles, maybe you look at Article 5, right? Then Article 6 deals with notice of meetings, right? That is a fairly crucial one for the discussion. Written 6.1, this is where a lot of people are worried about. Written notice of the time and place of a meeting of shareholders must be given to every shareholder entitled to receive notice of the meeting and to every director and the auditor of the company. Now, notice of the time and place of a meeting. So if you are having a virtual meeting, there is a place of a meeting. Especially when you're having a hybrid model meeting, the suggestions have been made by the CSC, there is a place of meeting, right? Then it says notice has to be given A, not less than 15 days before the meeting, and then B, not less than 10 working days. The notice must set out the nature of business transacted at the meeting and the text of the resolution, so on and so forth. Now, the notice has to be given, and the next one, the methods of holding meeting is also set out in the model articles. Now, methods of holding a meeting, it says a meeting of shareholders may be held either A, by a number of shareholders who constitute a quorum, being assembled together at the place, date and time appointed for the meeting, or B, by means of audio and visual communication, by which all shareholders participating and constituting a quorum can simultaneously hear each other throughout the meeting. So 7B provides for this type of situation. If your articles of the company sometimes may not expressly have it, right? But if you have sort of copied this particular model, it looks at dealing with audio-visual communication where the participation is important. Then again, under 10, it talks about voting, 11 talks about proxies, 12 talks about minutes, and 17 talks about the AGM and EGM again. Then they refer to proceedings at meetings of directors, board meetings, 23. There again, under 26B, it specifically says, and working on that only, most of these companies had these meetings early also. 26B, methods of holding meetings, that is the board meeting. B says, by means of audio and visual communication, by which all directors participating and constituting a quorum can simultaneously hear each other throughout the meeting. Right? Now that is permitted for the board meeting, that is permitted for the shareholders meeting. Now, in most of in companies where the articles expressly has not set it down, but what most of the articles I have seen does not expressly say that you can't do this. So it comes to a definition of it comes to the situation where how you have to interpret this. Now, the idea of giving notice is to convey the message to the other party. How you convey, no one can complain. Well, I know there was a the newspaper says that there is a AGM and such a date and such a place and a hybrid AGM, but no one has sent me a letter. Now that type of thing the courts would not accept, because these are situations which don't come up this disruption. If you look at even if you look at the constitution of the country, well, no, even the 48 Solberry Constitution or 72 Republican Constitution or 78 Democratic Social Republic Constitution would not have anticipated anything we have gone through during these last 2-3 months, where this is an urgent situation. Maybe in 1944-45 in the Second World War, thereafter the 1971 insurgency, they are now at the Civil War, and all these situations are that we got to take, then and there you come. Now that doesn't mean that the country has to close down and no one can do anything, any work, because the constitution doesn't expressly provide for it. So it comes to interpretation. So if anyone challenges, well, the courts will have to look at how this is interpreted, the place where you're having the meeting. I'm sure my friend Jayanta will deal with the Electronic Transactions Act and the provisions which permit per se with the introduction. So you take the company law provisions on one side, then you take the articles of your company or the model articles on one side, and then you come to the third aspect. Now that is for all companies, all and sundry, whether it's public, private, limited, listed, unlisted, whatever. Then for listed companies, now this is specifically focusing on the listed companies, the regulator comes in. That's what Renuka mentioned. And they very correctly, the regulator very correctly issued the circular number 13-3-2020 dated 27th March 2020. It's a guidance note. You got to keep in mind, right? It's not a directive. It's not an order or anything. It's a guidance note for hosting of AGMs. And very correctly, they have suggested two forms, which is the virtual AGM and the hybrid AGM. Most of the companies have opted to have the hybrid AGM because you can have a physical AGM plus for certain people to join this particular, it's like a board meeting and some parties joining on a teleconference basis. There again, they deal with public notice very clearly. In that they say what is public notice. They have said, okay, try and give even the postponement and thereafter the date of everything because the gazette is not there. So give it by way of a newspaper. Then going further, they said you can disseminate the news through the CSC web page, right? Then your own company website can say we are having this thing. This is for the first time we are having this. Unfortunately, we can't have we can't accommodate all the people for the physical AGM. This is how we are going to have it. Then how to vote by proxy. Renuka dealt with that. Then questions to be put prior questions before the AGM. You can send the questions. Then alternate venues if 50 people are going to follow the protocols and all that. So the idea is to give all the information. What exactly is the AGM? Well, the shareholders get the annual report beforehand. They know exactly what is there in the annual report. How many read the annual report or not is another issue, but legally the annual report is sent. So they know exactly what is there in the annual report. And they are keen in getting the dividend approved. Right. So annual report is there. You have an opportunity to ask questions. You can send questions beforehand. What more do you want in an AGM? Right. So then you have the second category. The regulator has given you a guideline, and very correctly they have said, please seek your own legal advice and go forward. Right. And there have been questions that have been raised. I understand, but it's not a case of there may be teething problems at the outset. You know, anytime when you introduce a new thing, there are teething problems. You've got to get on with it. But then this should not be a stumbling block because the future is going to be this. If you have foreign shareholders, this is the ideal place where the foreign shareholders can participate in a virtual AGM. Then the fourth point I want to deal with is dealt with by my friend Jayanta, the ICT part of it, right? The information technology part of it in permitting these type of operations, whether it is possible, whether virtual AGM is possible, whether a hybrid AGM is possible, whether notice can be given, whether the proxies can be done the manner they want, whether the voting is possible, whether the notice is adequate, so on and so forth. Now, with the Electronic Transactions Act, most of these things are permitted, and Jayanta would deal with it. And we can deal with the questions as the speakers finish the sessions, their own presentations. But my focus is on these 4 points, namely the Company Act, company law provisions, the Articles of Association, the guidance from the regulator, and the IT side of it. Thank you.
Take us through very clearly on the different aspects that are relevant to the AGMs and board meetings. We'd now like to move to the third speaker, Mr. Jayanta Fernando. The topic is on relevant and applicable provisions of the Electronic Transactions Act and looking at electronic signatures and the admissibility in law. Mr. Jayanta Fernando is a director and legal advisor to ICTA, director of Sri Lanka CERT, and chairman of the LK Domain Registry. Most importantly, he was a pioneer and was a co-chair of the committee that was responsible for drafting the Electronic Transactions Act. So with that, over to you, Jayanta, to share some thoughts on how the relevance of the Electronic Transactions Act would be in the context of our 2 topics of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Asita. A very good afternoon to all of you. It's always nice to be amongst our good friends here with Dr. Harsha Cabral, Renuka, and my old friend Willington as well. Thank you very much for the extraordinary efforts taken by the moderator to organize and prepare all the panelists for this session. And I also thank the FITIS for their dynamic efforts taken in recent times to organize webinars to make people aware of how to do things in the electronic digital media. And the scope of my presentation today is to let everybody, the audience, know that legally the electronic digital transactions and digital documentation are legally governed, and give a glimpse of how it is taken care of. And in that context, I'm just trying to upload a set of slides. Basically, Asita, can you?
Yeah, Jayanta, we can. Thank you.
Right, fine. So basically, I'm trying to give you a very brief overview. In the interest of time, I know I just have about 10 minutes to give an overview of the enabling legal framework for digital transactions, which is also the legal tool available for digital or electronic equivalents of written notifications that Dr. Harsha Cabral mentioned, as well as for various forms of electronic records to be maintained, and how you give legal validity to those electronic equivalents of written paper-based documentation referred to in the Companies Act and many other laws that you can find. So a very brief introduction to the Electronic Transactions Act. I'm mindful that many of you are familiar. Our Electronic Transactions Act of 2006 has been upgraded to a new international standard by amending Act number 25 of 2017. But what is to be noted is that the 2006 Electronic Transactions Act was also benchmarked on an international standard emanating from the UN Trade Law Commission, known as the UNCITRAL Model Law, and the subsequent treaty, the only treaty on the subject of digital transactions, namely the UN Electronic Communications Convention. And Sri Lanka became the first party, basically along with Singapore and first part in South Asia, along with Singapore and China, to sign the convention when it was opened up for signature in 2006. And over a period of time, after a gap analysis that was done to our law, we upgraded our law to a new version, and we are basically in line with what you find in many developed countries vis-a-vis digital transactions regime. As such, Sri Lanka is often used as a reference point along with Singapore in many African, Latin American countries, and most notably countries in the Pacific region. And Fiji, for example, Republic of Fiji followed the Sri Lankan standard governing electronic transactions when they amended the Electronic Transactions Act year before last and ratified the same convention, namely the UN Electronic Communications Convention. So this is the convention that I am talking about. You can download, and I will make these slides available. It is the gold standard governing electronic transactions. So I'll straight away skip all that and come to the main point relating to today's subject matter, namely the Electronic Transactions Act, and how it will take care of issues that were raised by the previous speakers, especially proceedings related to conduct of board meetings, issuing of written notices, and how various forms of records can be maintained. So basically, if you look at the head note to the Electronic Transactions Act, the long title, it says it's an act to recognize and facilitate the formation of contracts, the creation and exchange of 4 categories of instruments, namely data messages, electronic documents, electronic records, and communications. I would urge the audience to download the Electronic Transactions Act and have a look at these 4 categories of instruments and see how they are defined in the definition section of the Electronic Transactions Act. And then you will see that many of your manual documentation can be transposed into the digital medium. So for example, in the early days, there was a question as to whether a SMS would constitute, whether a SMS will be legally valid and how it will be taken care of under the Electronic Transactions Act. If you look at the definition of data messages, you will see that the entire gamut or the transactional element of a SMS is covered under the definition of data messages, and that based on a recent, of course, a commercial high court case, it was consolidated that the information contained in a SMS will have legal validity using the definition of data messages. So electronic documents is the same. You do electronic, let's say a Microsoft Word or OpenOffice document in electronic form. You store and archive that in electronic form digitally. You share that digitally in using email or any other cloud platform. That is an electronic document. And then you have the third category where you have written manual records. You want to convert that into digital form, and you will see the definition that when you convert that into digital form, it would take the form of an electronic record, and so on and so forth. So basically, the Electronic Transactions Act is pretty wide in its ambit, and you will see in a moment that it has cross-cutting effect, whereby notwithstanding the application of other laws, this Electronic Transactions Act has overriding legal effect. And on this slide, a very important point to note is that there are certain instruments and certain laws that have been excluded from the ambit of the Electronic Transactions Act. So for example, deeds of transfer relating to properties, power of attorneys, last wills, a certain category of instruments like trusts have been excluded. But remember, the Companies Act has not been excluded under the Electronic Transactions Act. So there is nothing to prevent you all from issuing digital notices in place of written notifications, maintaining records digitally, and conducting all your board meetings and transposing the requirements that are there in the Companies Act cited by Dr. Harsha Kabral as well as Renuka into the provisions of the Electronic Transactions Act and doing things digitally. I think you should, I encourage all of you to make use of this opportunity, the lockdown opportunity and beyond, to move to a new phase of conduct of meetings and proceedings digitally and maintain your records digitally so that you can have wider participation and ensure that even those who are disabled are able to take part in shareholder meetings. So some broad principles in the Electronic Transactions Act, I will be very brief here. There are very clear guidelines.
So we can take up questions surrounding his presentation at the Q&A time. We will move now to the fourth part of our webinar today, and that will be presented by Mr. Wellington Pereira. Wellington is an entrepreneur, independent IT consultant in technology, strategy, and IT solutions architecture. Wellington will talk to us about the different applications that can be used, and looking through some of the questions we have, I'm sure his presentation will address many of the technology and operational issues that are concerns to people, also referred to by Dr. Cabral in terms of how does one do a show of hands, voting, verifying the correct person is in fact registered for the meeting and so on. So with those brief comments, may I hand over to Wellington to take us through his presentation.
Once again, good evening, everyone. During the next few minutes, what I will do is I will give you a quick glimpse of what type of technologies that can be used to basically conduct your critical tasks during a AGM or a board meeting, essentially voting. I noticed in the Q&A panel already about 15 people have actually asked this very crucial question: how do we conduct a vote or a poll during a AGM or a board meeting? Basically, then also there was a set of questions, people asking how do we ensure or authenticate that it's the shareholder, it's the correct voter who's actually voting. So let me walk you through a couple of tools and technologies that is available for us to do this task. Then any subsequent concerns I will respond during the Q&A session. So VotePack is something that is very familiar to most of the large corporations in the country. Innovation by one of the great tech companies locally. Very popular application which will help you to manage a board meeting for a smaller audience. But the concern right now is how do we get onto a larger meeting? How do we conduct an AGM in our good old format to now moving into a digital format? So in that sense, there's a whole bunch of tools available that you can adapt. I will talk about a couple of best practices and best practices that we are used to, with security also in mind. You are very well aware that there's a lot of cybersecurity threats floating around these days, so we need to make sure that our meetings, the content of the meeting, everything is in a very secure environment. So keeping that also in mind, I will share with you a couple of proven tested tools that people are using around the world. One of the things that is very widely used right now is Microsoft Teams. Even to conduct this webinar, this event, this is exactly what we're using. This is an enterprise grade or a corporate grade secure environment that you can use to conduct a live event or a meeting. If you're hosting a meeting within the population, within the employees or shareholders inside your company who has an email address from the company name, or if you know the participants who are going to participate with an email address, this would be the ideal option. In the normal live meeting option, you can go up to 250 participants. But if you have a larger audience to attend to, there's another option inside Microsoft Teams, which I will talk about in a minute. Now, on the live meeting option, there can be a little bit of disruptions because when let's say 100 people join at a given time, everyone's video can appear, everyone's audio can appear. The participants have the right to unmute themselves and talk. So in a case of, let's say, having a deliberation, trying to vote on something, someone having a disagreement, that could be a very disruptive process. Imagine Even in a physical meeting, when 20 people try to state their opinion, it can be challenging. But in a digital environment, it can be even more challenging because the control, the moderator or the host of the event can mute everyone, but the individual participant has the right to unmute themselves. So if it is a known audience, if it is within company, I would recommend that we use Microsoft Teams meetings. But if it is to a large audience where you want a text-based Q&A option, etc., what I would recommend is actually to host Microsoft Teams live events. Now, right at this very moment, we are actually hosting a live event. So consider this as the board meeting. We have 5 or 6 speakers and our moderator and the event producer connected, and the audience, about 400 plus, I guess, audience is connected and to our live stream, and audience can engage with us, engage with the panel through the Q&A option. So this mode of event can go up to about 10,000 participants at any given time, and other advantages, people can join from any device that they're familiar with, that they have. They can join from a phone, they can join from their TV, they have a smart TV or any other device that they're familiar with. So if it is for a large audience, this is what I would recommend. Also the hybrid option where you have a need to have a physical audience at some location, but then the bigger event is broadcasted to needs to be broadcasted to a much larger audience. This would be an ideal option. Then there are so many different other options, video conferencing tools that you can actually depend on. Be mindful about the corporate security or enterprise security concerns that are floating around. Make sure to consult a reputed organization to get these tools inside the organization if you don't already have them. And in terms of voting and polls, the most asked questions I would say in the Q&A panel as of now, there are so many different options, hundreds of different options. Each and every single tool that you see on the screen, I have personally tested these during the last few days when we started preparing for this session. Each and every one of these tools I would highly recommend, depending on what your internal tech team is familiar with. Some of your companies might already have access to these tools. So then, I mean, if you are already a Google customer using emails and all that, you already have access to them. So don't need to invest again on buying another tool. If you are a Microsoft Office 365 user, again, you have access to Microsoft Forms. If you don't have these, you can actually go ahead with one of these other tools, which are very cost effective, very easy to deploy. What I will do now is I will demonstrate 2 of these tools on just to give you a glimpse of how to easily conduct a quick vote. Just assume a scenario where now you are in middle of your meeting, you have to basically put put a question to the audience to get their quick feedback, but you want to make sure that that feedback is really authenticated. Now, when you create the poll, you have a couple of options to look out for. For an example, the poll can actually be an authenticated poll where you're sending it out prior to the event, prior to starting the AGM. You're sending it out to the audience, so it's going to a very specific email address, and it can be embedded with a unique token, so you can make sure that only a allowed participant actually connects to this email. But be mindful, if the participant shares his username or password with an outsider, that is beyond our control. That's similar to if you share your email address with a third party, you have no control over it thereafter. So if you focus on my screen, I will first show you this Microsoft Forms option, which is very simple to create. There are so many options that you can look at here. You can make sure that this is a open poll or closed poll, so it stays within the company. You can put a time slot. You can even put the exact time that you want to start this poll and end this poll, so no one outside the meeting time actually votes this. So the time can be controlled. You can allow the participants to get notifications about their responses as well. Creating this is quite simple. You can I just created an example question. If they want to get a vote on appointing company auditors or secretaries, just click this. Then you have to simply go to this share option, and then you can even share this link on the chat window, on the Q&A window of the meeting host environment, and then people can real-time vote. And when they vote, this responses tab will actually get activated. You will see the number of responses and what each response really means. So this is one way of doing it. But if you really want a bit more interactive tool, little bit more interactive tool, here's one of my favorites. Here you can create your questions in advance, but send one question at a time to the audience. This is a tool called VoxVote. Now let me quickly demonstrate this, because assume your audience member is actually joining from their phone. Now what happens is, now notice the screen, the poll is not yet open. So I have basically created the poll and it's just waiting there. Now what I have to do is, I'll have to simply send a invitation code to the member. I'll show you my phone screen. So I'm basically logging into VoxCode. I have this code, so I will say OK. And then, so I'm now logged into the vote. See, it's waiting for questions. If I now start this, now I have actually added 15 seconds for participants who respond for this question. See, now it's counting down the 15 seconds. If I agree, I can mark agree. And if I now vote, my vote gets submitted for this particular question. So I can now jump to the next question. Like this, at the meeting agenda, when each and every question is required to be put to the audience, you can use this tool very effectively. Now the next question. So I have to say start. And then if I'm disagreeing, I can disagree. And then the result will appear here automatically when I vote. So when let's say 100 people are voting, you will see the results appearing in this window. And then, right, see now one person had voted saying disagree. So now this result can be published to the audience real time if required, which can actually be very effective in terms of getting everyone's agreement, everyone's acceptance on that a real poll or real vote happened. Like this, there are so many other tools that you can adapt, and then it's just a matter of putting a little bit of time to experiment with it and trialing it. If any assistance is needed, all of us at the ICT Federation are at your service. Feel free to get in touch with us, and we are happy to help. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mr.
Hello, everyone. I'm assuming I can be heard now. Right. Thank you very much, Wellington, for sharing those points with us. And I think those also resolve some of the questions raised. We would now like to get to the Q&A. We've had a large number of questions. Several are sort of repeat questions, meaning the same issues perplex many of our attendees. So we would like to combine those and pose those questions as specific questions to the panel. If I may take a few minutes, firstly, to deal with the board meetings aspect of it, and there have been a few questions relating to electronic signatures, the acceptability, for instance. If I may pose this to Mr. Fernando, you want to take maybe as part of the question, you might want to take that slide which you felt you would like to share with the audience. But this particular question was the acceptability of electronic signatures. There was a couple of questions around the register of companies in terms of signing annual returns, for instance, that they are still not acceptable. A point of view was expressed. And in terms of resolutions of boards, even if the meetings are held electronically, the resolutions for bank mandates, for dividend declarations, interim dividends, and so on tend to go by hard copy circular to the directors. Any comments you'd like to make in terms of how these can be made more efficient by using electronic signatures?
So, Asita, am I heard?
Yes, can hear you well.
Yeah. Actually, I was on this slide. He said visible. I have a slide here.
Yeah.
So basically, I was on that slide I got cut off mid-air due to some network problem here. Basically, I was on the point about electronic equivalence of a writing. I was trying to emphasize that the requirements of written notices, maintaining records in written form required, let's say, under Section 117 of the Companies Act that was mentioned by Dr. Harsha Cabral, President's Council, can be transposed into the electronic environment, and you can gain legal recognition by using the provisions of the Electronic Transactions Act effectively, because the Electronic Transactions Act overrides the other law, and it says in every section here that notwithstanding any provisions stated in any other law, this would apply. So getting into your question about digital signing of documentation and those instruments you mentioned, I would urge you to quickly basically refer to Section 7 of the Electronic Transactions Act, which was further modified in the Amending Act number 25 of 2007 to give a greater international recognition, so that we can use a digital signature issued here to have validity in other countries. So for cross-border communications as well, but never mind that. The basic point is that the Section 7 read with the definition of electronic signature would take care of that aspect, and digitally signing documents would have a greater integrity. I say that if you use digital signing methods with a secure digital certificate obtained from a recognized certification service provider, we have one of them in Sri Lanka, known as Lanka Sign, which is part of Lanka Clear. You use that technology to digitally sign, even a minor adjustment or variation of a change done to that document will be immediately detected by the other parties concerned. So I would urge that the digital signing method is much more secure and effective than maintaining documents in manual form. And of course, Asit, I will make use of the opportunity to conclude my presentation by also emphasizing the slide on electronic signatures, which will be shared. But more importantly, to emphasize that if you make use of Electronic Transactions Act to not only to conduct meetings, but even to maintain records, written records in digital form using Section 4 and other sections of the Electronic Transactions Act, you would have the benefit of evidence and admissibility making use of the provisions of Chapter 5 of the Electronic Transactions Act, where certain, as long as you have been governed by a proper documented process, a business process. So for example, if you want to conduct and issue AGM notices electronically, you can maybe the internal operational rules of a company can be modified, upgraded, where the company secretary can be urged to update their records annually with the designated email address of all the shareholders, for example, accompanied by the mobile numbers. And using that method, you do things digitally, and then the effective provisions of the evidence admissibility criteria found in the Electronic Transactions Act can be to the advantage of the company concerned when it comes to justifying certain steps taken. If there's a question relating to that, I'll take it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayanta. And so lots of questions mainly on the AGM. So I guess we'll move to that now. In the order of sequence, one is notice, giving of notice. Maybe Harsha dealt with it to an extent. Reference is being made that in the case of a notice being given, the place of the meeting and notice given to every shareholder is referred to in the Act, and would that provision be sufficiently complied with if the notice is given by way of the website of the CSC, the website of the company, and in email communications, and also the place, the question of whether if it's not a hybrid meeting and if it's an entirely virtual meeting, how does the question of the place of the meeting get addressed? Harsha, would you like to comment, please?
Yes. Going forward, to be very specific, it is best to fine tune your own articles, right? Because as I said earlier, anyway, a virtual meeting also will have a place, because it has to originate from some place. So the place and the time, as I mentioned earlier, even in the model articles, most of the other articles have it. That is why most of the companies have opted for the second option of the hybrid model of the AGM, because they are going to have a meeting at a particular place. So X amount of shareholders will be permitted within the COVID-19 protocol, and also then if possible to may have certain other places also, venues also, otherwise to join online. So that is like joining a video conference of a board meeting. So there is a place. So by giving that, you satisfy that. So you have to interpret it in such a way that this particular meeting will take place at such and such a place. That is the notice that has been given. So the idea of notice, as I told you earlier, is to convey the message. If that person has got the, he can't say, I know there is a meeting on such and such a date, but I have not received the letter. That is not the issue. How notice, so even if you are going to complain to a court of law, the court of law will have to interpret. Even the constitutional amendments are interpreted by the Supreme Court. So that is the issue that has to be, rather than saying you can shut it out. And I mentioned, Jayanta knows that when we were drafting the Companies Act, the e-documentation was looked at. That is why certain provisions I mentioned, it provides documentation, how to, and the main thing is the maintaining a proper minute, right? Minutes are taken as a contemporaneous document, and you ratify certain transactions, and you confirm the minutes, even the board minutes. The following meeting, you confirm the minutes. If there is anything wrong, you will correct it. So the idea, even in a EGM or AGM, you will follow the same mechanism, and the fact that there has been a meeting held and the place, the time is interpreted in such a way, provided that shareholder has, because there was a definite problem of giving, because the postal system was also not operative for almost 2 months. So the issue is, well, the newspaper, then the e-news that was going round, then because all the shareholders, that is why the security part of it, and Wellington and Jayanta touched on it, maybe every shareholder has an email address. Unless he doesn't know anything, he can contact the company and say, well, look here, I have no way of getting my messages. Why don't you tell me? Then they can be contacted in some form. Now, actually, going forward, I think Renuka mentioned earlier also, going forward, even the regulator will have to look at these aspects and fine tune them.
Asita, if I may add to.
Please, Renuka, I was going to ask you also whether you have any comments on the same subject.
So on this, with regard to this issue about notice, I would look at it this way also. Now, Articles of Association is a contractual document between the members, the shareholders, and the company. Not everything can go into that. Now, certainly, I don't think any articles would have realized this sort of a situation, right? So now, the AGM is an annual event, so shareholders are generally aware of the AGM, right? So there is a reasonable expectation that AGM will be held during a particular period. So now let's see, now for postal services apparently leaping back to normalcy, so the issue is not so serious right now. But 2 months ago, there was no postal service. So what can the company do in this instance? On one hand, law doesn't allow the company to postpone the AGM. It has to be held within 6 months from the end of the financial year or 15 months from the last AGM. So there is a deadline there. No waiver was given. So postal service is not working. So then what else can the company do? Life has to go on, as Dr. Harsha very clearly said, life has to go on. Company has to conduct its affairs. You can't just keep on postponing and face criminal liability also, I suppose, to the directors. Directors will have to be reappointed. Dividends will have to be approved. Then auditors will have to be appointed. If there's charity, that has to be approved. I don't think the accounts are to be approved. I think accounts are submitted for consideration, according to my knowledge. So these matters will have to be concluded at some point. So what are the options left to the company in this environment? Okay, you can publish in the newspapers. No paper copies, but e-newspapers are available. That's all. That is beyond the control of the company. The websites, CSC website, company's website is there. And also some of the banks have gone and published these notices in their social media sites also. So what else could they have done? There was curfew. There's no way that you can have a courier service and going and delivering these things. So you let look at it practically. So company has done everything possible within the trying circumstances. So why would anybody, I think Dr. Harsha clearly mentioned this, there's lots of questions on this. What else is there? Ideally, yes, articles should be amended, but you can't do it within the next couple of months. That was the issue. So you need to readjust to the situation. I would look at it like a force majeure situation also, because this scenario, I don't know, maybe which I can think about that. This is not even thought of. So this is the best way the company can conduct its affairs. I don't see any problem. And also, you must understand at some point, as I said earlier, you have to move into this digital era. There will be some, it's too premature for me to talk about it. We want to digitize end-to-end functions. I think SCC has very clearly set it out. The chairman SCC has very clearly gone to town with that. The affairs at the Colombo Stock Exchange are digitized. But Colombo Stock Exchange is not the only component of the whole capital market. There are brokers, there is listed companies. So we need to look at it holistically. There will be some new rules, new procedures, new methodologies coming up. That's for the future. Actually, it will happen sooner than later. But this time around, you need to look at it practically, and you need to look at it very rationally and conduct your affairs. And we are all for digitization. You need to every company must have the email addresses. Maybe that should be provided for in the articles. We'll think of that also later. CSC can impose certain minimum mandatory articles, like what we have done for free transferability clause, etc. You have to have a mobile phone. It's more relevant to the secondary trading actually, and also bank account with regard to dividends and all that. So those requirements those are given requirements. So that will happen in the future. But for the time being, I think this is the best way. You need to either have a totally hybrid or total virtual meeting or a hybrid meeting. Asita.
Thank you. Yeah. One of the other questions on the sequence of events here is the giving of proxies now. While the guideline makes reference to giving the proxies to independent director, there are questions being asked in relation to proxy foreign shareholders giving a proxy through a to a local party through and then any other means of giving proxies. So I believe the companies have the proxy forms on their websites, and maybe Renuka, you want to comment, but from some of the readings that we have done, the expectation is that these will be printed, filled, and resent to the designated email address of the company, along with copies of NICs and so on of the relevant parties, the sender and the party to whom the proxy is given. And in the case of foreign shareholders, Harsha, you might want to comment. Renuka, Harsha, would you like to take up any other views on this question of proxies?
Yeah,
I think
proxies is not an issue, Asita, because it is done before the holding of the meeting. So there can be so many things, corrections, everything done prior to the actual meeting. So the issues that I would anticipate is the proper holding of the meeting. Whatever notices, whatever questions, all that will be prior, and maybe the security part of it has to be looked into. That's another matter, as Jayanta very correctly said, and regulator will also look into those aspects. But as Jayanta says, we have the Electronic Transactions Act. We must be very happy that that is in place at least.
Renuka, would you like to also comment on this?
I think, Asa, you partly answered when you raised this issue. If I may go by whatever the announcement that have come in with regard to certain banks which have rescheduled their meetings, either total virtual or hybrid meetings, what they are going to do, I will just share, because the regulator will not go into these nitty-gritties anyway. You must understand, we cannot go and specify all those things in our rules. We can, this is a learning experience for us also. So now, to me, the ideal way of doing that is, yes, you publish your notices, proxies, everything on the websites. The shareholder will have to download and sign and give all the information that the company has asked. I think they have asked the email address and scan it and send it to the designated email address. Right? I would assume that at some point the identification documents will be checked. I checked a few announcements, but I didn't see any reference to the identification documents being required to be attached with the initial documentation. I'm assuming that at some stage it will happen. Then company will verify that with the shareholder list and then communicate based on that email address. So that's where the protection of the Electronic Transaction Act will come in according to what I understand, because the shareholder himself has given a email address. Company has verified the identity of the shareholder. So the email address it should be assumed that it is his email address, and you start communicating with that address. Now you take even a manual scenario, if you send the proxies and annual report via post, it can also get into the wrong hands, right? But the company's responsibility should be sending the annual report and all the other documentation, including the proxy, to the registered address. So likewise here, if the shareholder has given a designated email address, and if the company has taken reasonable steps to verify that it is so and so, after that company should be permitted to communicate with that shareholder using that address. That level of protection, I'm assuming, must be provided under the Electronic Transaction Act.
Yeah, Asit, if I'm to add to that, Asita, I think I fully agree with what President's Counsel Harsha Cabral as well as Renuka just mentioned very clearly. Only to add that in the modern day context, there will be other verification methods that can be used in addition to email. So that is why I think companies, when they move into the digital medium and they want to be more innovative, I would urge them to use innovative practices based on some of the suggestions Willington gave a moment ago. So, for example, if you to add to what Renuka said, true enough, the company secretary can have an updated list, annually updated list of the designated email addresses of all the people. In addition to that, they can have the mobile numbers. So and other contact details. So one can verify the mobile through communication on a random basis. You can send WhatsApp, check whether was it you who sent the signed proxy digitally. You know, there are novel methods that can be used, or maybe even give a call like in the good old days and verify whether it is that person who sent that communication back, and this can be done on a random sample method. So I would urge that more innovation can come in using technology and using your CIO and head of technology in your organization. And based on what Willington said, plenty of technology tools are available where you can trace back to the origins of a communication. Thank you.
Thank you.
Asita, we can
yes.
stop the odd busybody who will complain and say, well, my email was hacked and he has sent a proxy, or that type of thing. We can't stop. I mean, we have to face all that and go forward.
True. You know, on the same topic, there's a few sort of different angles coming. One of the it's important to talk about the question of perhaps shareholders who are not sufficiently tech savvy to be able to deal with the signing in themselves, and what are the methods of supporting it. Maybe I'll ask Wellington to start off with that. In you know, what would perhaps each of them might have a friend or child or someone who might be able to deal with it, and so there's the legal aspect of it, whether it should be a proxy given to somebody or whether it is done unofficially. That's something maybe Wellington, you could start, and then we'll refer to the legal views also on this.
Yes, Mr. Salvatore. Give me a second. Right. On that question, during the last few days also, I have faced interesting conversations with well-experienced business tycoons, but when they have to suddenly use technology, there could be challenges. But that's a well-known fact. But technology can be made can be accessed very simply in most cases. For an example, for a meeting like this, all what the recipient will have to do is probably just click a link on the email, and the tech platform can take care of itself. Or else the industry associations or FITIs can basically support with very simplified 10-second, 15-second, 30-second video clips on how to quickly access. It's not rocket science. Technology today, I believe, is an essential tool for any C-level personnel. So if help is needed, there's an army of tech professionals who are willing to support on that. But then I'll leave it up to the rest of the panelists to answer the legality of getting a third-party support on a scenario like that. But then my 2 cents would be, if a third party can help you connect to one of your own devices, but practices needs to be followed, so you don't share these links with a third party. And also, it's highly recommended that you use a secure corporate grade email account, not a free email account from an unknown email source, email provider. If you use a corporate email account, the security can be elevated to a whole different level. Thank you.
Asita, I think some senior citizens have already contacted certain company secretaries, and the company secretaries have been able to help them out in case-by-case basis.
Correct. Before Wellington goes off there, Wellington, on the same topic now, the question of some may want to contact with the mobile phone. They may want to sign in with the mobile phone. It may be a notebook, it may be an iPad, or what you call it, the equivalent of a Samsung or whatever. So in that sense, is the method of connecting very different to each of these instruments?
The method of connecting is pretty much identical in any of these scenarios. I mean, if you look at a platform like Microsoft Teams, the client application is available for pretty much any device. Or if you don't want to install the app on your machine, as long as you have access to a web browser, the same environment, same tool can be accessed. If you're using another third-party tool such as Zoom or Skype, you have a similar experience. I mean, one of these technology vendors actually make sure these applications functions across any device that is available. So that would be a simplified experience for everyone.
Also, before another question to you, can I be here? Is the fallback in any scenario we need to have a backup mechanism? So in case the party cannot connect up through the technology solution or the particular provided solution, what is the backup arrangement that they can actually listen in onto the meeting?
Okay, that's a very good question. Now, this has happened in the recent few weeks in a couple of events. For most of these platforms, there's a phone number that you can actually use to connect, which is a very reliable, just like calling a friend or calling your corporate phone number. Even Microsoft Teams, Zoom can be enabled with a phone number. But in certain cases, local phone numbers cannot be activated. But Microsoft Teams, there are a couple of local telecommunication service providers who allow you to have a local phone number. So you don't have to call a foreign number. You can just dial a local phone number and you will connect to the meeting. So in that case, it will be a one-party, one-way meeting. So you can only listen to the audience, listen to the presenter. But worst case scenario, that would still be a great option.
Renuka, do you want to add anything to this part of the discussion?
Well, technical support is very necessary. I think what happens in other markets is that you have a sort of a online support system for this type of shareholders. So maybe it can happen through a specific, telephone line, or I'm not too sure. I think in most of those markets there are systems available. So I haven't personally seen anything like any systems here, so I really can't comment. It's up to the vendors to come up with it. In other markets, they use systems. All these fallback options are there, to my knowledge. And apart from that, I think lots of technical assistance has to be provided to shareholders, because remember one thing, change is resisted now, right? People are averse to change anyway, and the fear of the unknown and resistance to change is always there. We are talking about a market where even the knowledgeable shareholders, they still want the check, dividend check to be received, right? A debenture check has to come to them. They have to feel it. That is, so there's a huge change in the mindset that is required. I don't think it can happen overnight. There are still listed companies, even now, they want to have physical meetings, even in this environment. So that is the kind of market that we are talking about. So change has to happen. There's no question about it. But what apart from the technical aspect of it, what I would like to advise the listed companies who are listening to this, watching this, is you need to sell this to these shareholders, right? Because apart from the technical issues that some of these elderly shareholders might have, in an AGM, they really enjoy coming to an AGM. You know the reasons also. I don't need to dwell too much about it. One of the things that you must ensure that you need to plan this out. It should not be an exercise where, okay, we can't have this, then let us do it online and finish it off. For the sake of doing it, you should not do that. What you should do, you have to think through this entire process. You need to pre-plan this. I'm sure a lot of banks are doing it at the moment. You need to have some level of informal or formal guidelines within the company. How are you going to handle this? How would the questions be asked? Are you going to ask questions upfront? Every company will have to do that. So in what order? During the session, during the AGM, how are you going to address these questions? And there are people who will, given this opportunity, some will want to talk for a long period. How are you going to stop them? Some might even, there may be questions unrelated. So how are you going to handle that? The proxy voting, which is a very important aspect of it. All those things will have to be thought through very carefully. So first one, you need to have some ground rules available. Then these shareholders, they like interaction with the board and the senior management, right? They want a close level of engagement with them. So it's difficult to do that when you're having a sort of a hybrid or a virtual meeting to the extent that they have experienced before. So you need to ensure that there is no, they have access to the board, their questions are answered. So I really don't know how, because they need to be heard. They need to feel that they are also part of this whole process, not just they are being treated like mere spectators in this game, right? So that is very important. Otherwise, you can't sell this. Intentions are there, rules are there, the tools are there, but practically, by nature, it's very difficult sometimes. Then you need to give them equal access. Now, if you are having, some companies are thinking of having the physical component in multiple areas, which is fine. But then there has to be connectivity through maybe a video link, whatever. They should have equal access to information and equal opportunities of communicating, which is very important. And also we spoke about the technical support, and also please ensure that the whole entire proceeding is archived. It is very important. So I hope these vendors, it will emerge within Sri Lanka. There are lots of Sri Lankan companies which have been innovative. They'll come up with these tools for sure. But you need to have these facilities, and it's a mix of adopting to new environment, technology, practices, rules. It's a combination of all three. That's the way I look at it.
On the same topic, because there's a lot of interest on this, there is very quickly we'll deal with. There are important other areas to talk about also. Sharing of the link. There are several concerns that the link can be just forwarded and shared with many people, and they will sign in. Maybe this also has to be referred to Wellington first.
On that, it's a very critical area to actually look at. What we have to do is, when you create the meeting, there are options to restrict it to a known group of people. So even if the link is shared with the outsider, it won't allow that outsider third party to log into the meeting. There are ways and means in the tech platform to restrict who's joining into the meeting. So that would easily solve that problem. On the previous point,
yes.
In terms of technical support, I think it's absolutely crucial that you have the right tech people backing you to host this meeting. Otherwise, it could end up in a bit of disaster manageable. What you should look at is first group of people to bank companies should be your internal IT team in your organization, because pretty much all the companies, listed companies, I'm sure they have a very competent internal IT team basically doing the internal infrastructure and all the facilitation of technology tools. Then if they further need help, the local tech ecosystem has a plethora of companies with premium expertise who are even servicing global corporations. So they are the parties to call. So I'm sure most of these companies are already in touch with some of them. If not, give a shout to the SP Federation. We have 100+ members who have premium expertise who can deliver this level of technical support and assistance for you to host your meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. There are a few. I know we have overshot the time, but there are some very important questions that have been raised. One is the question of registration. The other is the question of show of hands on a resolution, and let's see, what was the third one? Yeah, those were the two, the registration and the show of hands, and the questions were the three that also has a lot of interest. In terms of registration, I think Renuka, those who have already ventured fairways in this have made the email address of the company is well made note of, I mean, is informed through the website of the company, the CSC and all that, and the individuals have to communicate their email addresses, and then they are, by sending some identification, they are verified as to whether they are shareholders, and the process is repeated after just 1 hour before the meeting or whatever on some schedule. So I think that companies have worked around it. Do you want to add anything more to that? So
not really.
Yeah.
Not really.
I think the voting on resolutions is a important thing. I know that Wellington took us through a few. When I say voting, this is just a question of on this regular standard meeting where there is adoption of the report of the directors, there is the accounts, there is the election of the directors, and the other matters like appointment of auditors and so on. Now, in each of these resolutions, there is one proposal that only, I mean, this question to Harsha, can they first say, because of the complexity of technology, if there's a large number of attendees, can we ask only for, there's a proposer and a seconder, and then a question of those against? So that we'll have a lesser number.
Proposer and the seconder, because the practical side of it is poll is a rare occurrence.
Yeah.
So it is if the proposal is accepted, right? Unless there is opposition.
Yeah.
When there is opposition, then there should be a sizable number of shareholders opposing it. But the practice has been, as you know, right? Most of those, the appointments of directors, then the appointment of the auditor, right? Those, because most of the listed companies, very rarely you see a AGM going beyond half an hour.
So do you feel that it is, if there's a proposer and a seconder, probably in the physical meeting space, and then the chairman says, ask anyone against or those against,
that's right,
and then they take account of that, and then can declare that the resolution is carried?
Absolutely.
That's a fair way to proceed.
Yeah.
Asita, and also the importance of having the required number of proxies. I'm sure listed companies are well aware. You are basically prepared. You have the required number of votes in terms of proxies. So how they address this is, okay, they will say item number 1, we have got this much of proxies representing this person, the shareholders. So you put it in the opposite way, as I think you mentioned earlier. So I don't think it will be an issue there, that even in physical meetings, Harsha, that's how it happens, no?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. The question of quorum was also a matter raised. Now, whether those who are planning to have a physical, a hybrid meeting, a part physical, part virtual, whether they can accommodate in the physical space only selected members who would comprise the quorum and who would probably bring in sufficient voting rights to enable a resolution to be carried, or do you have to go in on a first come first served basis to be equitable? Or is it
on the process they follow? Because some companies, they would go on the first come first served basis, or there's institutional shareholders, because that will solve the problem to a certain extent. Straight away you have the quorum.
Right. So there is
And
nothing
also,
to prevent anyone of these.
Asita, there are certain companies, according to the articles, they need certain number of quorum to be comprised of certain number of shareholding, 20% or whatever, I think certain banks. So they will have to, because if you say first in, first out, you might have, if company has to first decide how many people you can accommodate in your environment. That is the first thing. They know the numbers previously, is it 100, 200? So they can have a fair idea as to how many we want. So if it is 75, you have to cater for that. And we are talking about hybrid meetings. So 75 can't be the small scale shareholders only, then you won't meet the quorum. So you might need to have a combination of this depending on the company. And some companies are, say, quorum is say 10 shareholders, then you can easily achieve it, right? But some have these percentages. So you need to accommodate for both.
Right. So that's this question of getting to Jayanta, resolutions electronically signed. When getting resolution electronically signed, should you accept only via DocSign, etc., or should the company secretaries maintain a digital signature certificates? Jayanta, since most of us are not very familiar with this process, would you be able to enlighten the audience, please?
So if you transpose that example into the Electronic Transactions Act, Asita,
right.
I made it clear in my slide that we have a broad definition of electronic signatures, and various classes of signatures in electronic form will be legally valid. So you take a very rudimentary model of DocuSign, where that is okay. There are ways of doing it in a secure manner by the company secretary's office. They do it securely in a controlled environment and run through the process in a proper manner. Yes, that is fine. But I would say for resolutions of significant importance, digitally signing with a digital certificate will have greater validity, for the simple reason that once you digitally sign, it is better than even a paper-based a document, because Willington and many other technology people will agree, once you digitally sign a document with a digital certificate, that is a best form of maintaining a document with the highest level of integrity, and will have greater evidentiary value in the event of any dispute that arises with regard to the validity of the resolution. So I would propose that since Sri Lanka has since 2013 been embarking on a number of digital initiatives with digital signing methodologies, especially in the banking sector, we encourage companies to look at this option so that they can benefit from the admissibility, the more flexible admissibility regime available under Chapter 5 rules governing evidence under the Electronic Transactions Act. Thank you.
Just on the same thing, Jayanta, pardon me, but for those of us who are the 101 level of getting this done, what's the starting point to get the digital signature, validated by who's the authority you got to go to, and how does this whole process take place?
Yeah, so maybe I will ask Willington to join me in this, but to explain, well, if you want to get a corporate digital certificate and then have designated individuals in that corporate entity to be recognized as those who are having control over those digital certificates, well, there are a number of options available in Sri Lanka. We have a recognized digital certificate service provider recognized under the Electronic Transactions Act under the root hierarchy that we have with a governance framework which jointly is regulated by Central Bank and ICTA and Sri Lanka CERT, of which we are part of. And that entity that was authorized in 2013, 1st of March, is Lanka Sign. And if you go to the Lanka Clear website, you have the Lanka Sign logo somewhere, and you have all the documentation that can be submitted even electronically. But I would propose that if there is any further guidance needed on the subject, those who have a Q&A can send a clarification to FITIS, and then I will be delighted to respond and direct them to the relevant authority, and even Willington can do that. And it's a very simplified process of how one can obtain a digital certificate from Lanka Sign. It's available in lankaclear.com website. And once you get the token, there is a user guide. But remember, in using the token by the company secretary and other important officials of a company, especially in a listed company environment, we have to make sure that the terms and conditions of use are followed. And if not, remember, both the corporate and that individual concerned may be subject to criminal penalties under the Computer Crimes Act. So there are safeguards available, and that's why I propose that digital signing methods should be encouraged, not only in the COVID kind of scenario, but even beyond this kind of lockdown situation, so that we can, as a country, evolve into a more sophisticated platform into a truly digital nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Benedictine, would you want to say something?
Just a quick addition. I mean, this whole process of digital signature can actually vary from you scanning and putting your signature in a document and copying it to other documents to send it out to a bank or another party via an email, which is apparently taken valid in most scenarios. But then it can also be a situation where you are electronically through email or another document sharing or a management system accepting documents in a proper format, but also it can go to a very extreme extent or a sophisticated extent of what Siddhartha mentioned, where you, using a digital certificate, you sign the document. There are enough platforms and technologies available which will help you to very seamlessly do this, even though it sounds a lot of very, very hardcore tech. For the general user or a company, the technologies have actually simplified usage of these. It's just a matter of going through the documentation, starting a trial run, and taking the first step to start this process. So that's the only thing that I would add. Thank you.
Asita, I just want to add, Asita, just one point I missed that was reminded by Willington in the course of his intervention. Although I mentioned digital certificate issued by Lanka Sign, which is a recognized certification service provider under the Electronic Transactions Act, the law is very clear. It does not exclude an individual or a corporate from obtaining other digital certificates from other reliable parties. So it is up to the company concerned to define the standards in their operations manual, as Dr. Harsha Cabral quite rightly agreed, and then develop it from there and use, if it's an international corporate dealing with international entities and international shareholders, you might have a digital certificate coming from a foreign service provider that would get the same level of recognition under the Electronic Transactions Act. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question which we have not dealt with before. This is to Renuka. Can a company dispense with the printed annual report or CD and just email the copy of the annual report to shareholders and submit a soft copy to the CSC and other authorities?
Asita, yeah, this is another question that that is posed to us frequently. Basically, even now, the listing rules does not preclude companies from sending soft copies, because you have to understand there is provision in the company law which has to be complied with. If I remember correctly, the Companies Act section, I can't remember, section 167, I think, says that every company annual report shall be sent or caused to be sent to all the shareholders. That's the wording. Yeah. So it doesn't specify the mode. Now what we have done is we have also broadly said that listed company shall ensure that the annual report is issued to every shareholders. We have also said that without prejudice to other provisions, a listed company may issue the annual report in a CD-ROM, right? So that is what virtually every listed company does. Now, if probably we will streamline this further, because we can't change the Companies Act. Companies Act requires the company to send the annual report. Now that is, you can interpret it in different ways. Again, we are not going to get into that. We will allow further flexibility for the listed companies to sort of send the annual report according to in a manner that they think which is legally correct based on legal advice. So in future, once we amend the rules, you will see some changes. We will communicate that. Only thing is, even now you can do it. Now, for example, a lot of companies are asking, can we send just a notice giving the web link URL, asking the shareholders to download the annual report from that. Whether that would meet the requirements set out in the Companies Act, it's up to the company to be advised. Okay. Even now you can actually consider that, because what we have said is company may send the CD, which suggests that there are other ways. Of course, we have said that the hard copy has to be, if you are selecting the CD option, hard copy has to, certain number of hard copies will have to be sent to shareholders if they request. So going forward, we will give greater flexibility to listed companies to dispatch the annual reports according to the manner that is envisaged under the company law. Let me clarify that aspect of it. That will happen.
Yeah. Okay, Harsha, if you would like to comment as well, I believe the Companies Act provides for a breached version to be sent first, and
yeah, that is correct. The wording is the board of every company shall within 6 months prepare the thing, but 167 says the board of a company shall cause a copy of the annual general meeting report to be sent to every shareholder of the company. Now, most of the companies, the practice has been they send the CD and only on request they give the hard copy, because otherwise a large number of copies are made and it's a utterly unwanted exercise, right? I suppose it's a reading material, all right, but now with after hearing Jayanta, we are very convinced that even giving the URL contact is enough for them to follow. If they really want a copy, we can give them a copy. So you can reduce the number of hard copies and use that money for a better purpose. You can even increase the dividend of the shareholder.
Exactly. I fully agree with that.
Asita, this CD option came long ago, about 12 years ago, when we amended the listing rules in 2007 or 8, if I remember correctly. So we will further revise it. In fact, we have already proposed it to SEC by waiting for their approval. We will give greater flexibility. We can't say anything to the contrary of the Companies Act. We can't go and interpret a different method. So we will just pretty much give the flexibility to listed companies to be advised and send the annual report in a legally acceptable manner.
Harsha, you also drew our attention at the beginning in your presentation to the definition section of the Act, where documents were referred to as not only written. Can we not take cover under that provision?
You can, because that was brought in for that purpose in 2007 Act. Specifically, we had discussions with people like Jayanta, and we were in the process of even online documentation, though the even at that time there was a project to computerize the company registry, but still it has not happened. But the idea was that. So we have done a lot of modifications, even giving the company number was for that purpose, so that it's easy to get a document. Now, even now you can download the forms. There are 46 forms under the Companies Act. You can download the forms and then type it and hand it over, but lodging it still manual. So the time has come to move forward and use those definitions, work within the framework. It's amending the law is a long process. It will take another 10 years to get a small amendment in. But why not work within the parameters of the law, take into consideration the Electronic Transactions Act and move forward. Articles you can amend with a special resolution. The company can do whatever you want. That's an internal document. But amending the Companies Act is a cumbersome affair.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we've overshot time quite a lot. But one very important topic we didn't talk about. We might want a few minutes for that. That's the question of dividends. Renuka, I think in your guidelines there was reference to it, and you alluded to it in your presentation, that it could be an interim or await the annual general meeting. Harsha, do you want to make any reference to if it were to be taken as an interim, then it will be interim for the subsequent year, I would expect, in the 2021 financial period. Isn't it?
Yes. As
Yeah.
for the shareholders' point of view, the main thing is the dividend. So when the AGM gets postponed, they are affected. So the suggestion made by the regulator was, why don't you make a interim dividend and then make sure that at the correct time to declare the dividend. But I must say the banks had another issue. There was a directive issued by the central bank 2 weeks ago, where the future dividends were temporarily stopped for the banks. Now, the dividends that were announced earlier, now the banks have sought advice, guidance from the central bank. How about the dividends that were announced, which have to be approved at the AGM, announced or not approved, but the share market has acted on that announcement. So whether it's not correct to pay that dividend, but with regard to the other listed companies, that doesn't apply, and they can the suggestion made by the regulator is good enough.
Asita,
Yes.
they can do that. I think one fact that they need to consider here is that when you are converting it to interim dividend, it has to apply to the current financial year. Obviously,
Yes.
Either 21-22 financial year. So there
Right.
could be financial implications there, because now the previous final dividend was based on the audited accounts as at 31st March this year. So if you are making it interim dividend, the payout happens in the future. So there could be financial implications, especially considering the business environment that is affected because of COVID-19.
Yeah.
So maybe these are, and also what Harsha said, for banks, I think the central bank would have looked at it like a fresh dividend, and in spirit of it is the same thing. But there could have nobody really opted for this. But now we see that a lot of companies want to sort of have some guidance on this, even from central bank, because and there's another issue regarding this. Because it was tied to the final dividend, which didn't get approved, dividends are held up, and also we have to add a few comments on the mode of payment also. Now we have clearly advised the listed companies to electronically transfer the dividend if the shareholder has given specific bank accounts. Now we are not very happy about it, because it happens in certain companies, but it certainly doesn't happen with regard to certain companies. You will be shocked to see sometimes the listed company posts a check to the bank, given to the bank where the bank account number is given by the shareholder. Now that kind of practices are not acceptable. So in future there will be certain directions on that also. So it's about the mode of payment.
Yes, that's a very valid point. I believe, again, reading the notices of the different companies that have already announced their meetings, and in terms of dividend, I think many had mentioned that it would be sent to a closest branch, and the individual would have to give, prove their identity and collect the check from the closest branch of that particular bank or a designated bank. So there will be practical workarounds, but as you rightly say, there will be going forward better methods of getting the bank accounts registered and direct transfers to respective shareholder banks. So that is, I think, Renuka, can we have any final comments from you before we wrap up the session in terms of any plans of the CSC going forward, recommendations, suggestions, seeking any other views from the members here?
Going forward, I think, in my view, I think based on the discussion that happened today, and also I was reading the questions, the take home is, I think it's imperative that the listed companies amend their articles to facilitate these changes, virtual AGMs and payment of dividends, etc. That is imperative. Going forward, I think it has to happen, but that's the way world is moving, and that's the way we also want the market to sort of get adjusted. That is one. Second thing is, I think to facilitate that, there may be certain regulatory directives, or even rule changes that might be suggested by us. to facilitate this environment. Now, this audience is pretty much comprised of listed companies. So we are now SEC and CSC set up a committee. Janthi is also a member there. Digitization committee, which is looking at digitizing all capital market operations. So not only the secondary market trading involving brokers, we will be looking into these aspects also. Payments of dividends, dispatch of annual reports. So there are three things. Every investor entering this capital market, every shareholder of a listed company mandatorily will have to have three things. Number one, a bank account. Without a bank account, I don't think you can. Everybody has bank accounts, even a savings account. Then you have to basically have a mobile number, very important, and also a designated email address. So to enable that, there may be some regulatory directions coming to facilitate it. So going forward, I think listed companies will have to amend the articles to facilitate, because in this whether there's a calamity like COVID-19 or not, I think we need to move into this digital era and facilitate virtual AGMs.
Thank you, Renuka. There is a very useful comment. I think it's the final question here. It's a request, and I think that request can be referred to FITIS, saying that since this party got a bit late to join the meeting, whether we can make available the presentation on what's the video recording on the whole thing is what Willington tells me. If CSC is happy to publish it, that can be made facilitated. Would that be okay, Renuka? Or?
Yeah, should be able to. We will discuss with the relevant people.
Okay, but the legality and acceptability of it.
By and large, the whole discussion was related to listed companies, so why not?
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for spending the time with us for nearly 2 hours on this discussion. I hope it was valuable and useful to you in taking forward the AGMs and board meetings in your respective companies, and also to FITIS for facilitating this, CSC and our partner SEMA. I would like to hand over to Abbas to make some final closing comments. Also to the panel, gentlemen, it has been excellent interaction. Appreciate the thoughts that you have shared.
Thank you, Asita. And I think I have to say that it's been quite exhaustive amount of information that this excellent panel of speakers have shared with us today. I'm sure that we're all going to go out of this session much more enlightened and I think much more comfortable in the way forward, especially with regards to our board meetings and our AGMs. So with that, I just have 2 ideas to share. I think this is something that I started at the beginning of the session, was basically the theme of every crisis actually creates new opportunities. And I believe organizations should actually look at the opportunities created by virtualization and not really give in to the elements of unknown and the fear with regards to the unknown. And I also would like to add that, we shouldn't actually overestimate the public in terms of information technology and literacy, because this is a country that has more mobile phone connections than the number of citizens. And we also have over 50% smartphone penetration. And if I'm not wrong, we also have over 7 billion Facebook users. So I'm pretty sure that if you look at digitization, the public will not have too much difficulties. With any new technology, as with anything new, you're going to have the teething problems, but I'm sure that you'll find that it's more positives coming out of it than negatives. So with that, I would like to actually conclude with a few closing remarks. I would like to first and foremost thank our panel today, Mr. Asisa Talwat, Chairman, Management Systems Private Limited, for moderating this event. Dr. Harsha Cabral, Chairman, Tokyo Cement Group and Director, BOI Sri Lanka. Thank you very much. Mr. Renuka Vijayawardena, Chief Regulatory Officer, Colombo Stock Exchange, and Mr. Jayantha Fernando, Director, Legal Advice, ICTA, Director, Sri Lanka CERT, and Chairman, LK Domain Registry. And last but definitely not least, Mr. Wellington Pereira, for all the technical inputs, COO of Enhancer Private Limited, for all the technical inputs. And I think it goes without saying, thank you all for the effort put in preparing for this session as well as conducting the session. And I would also, it would not be right of me to thank our partners for this session. Basically, this was conducted in association with CIMA and the Colombo Stock Exchange. Our event partners, SoftLogic and Dell. Our platform partners /Tech Labs, messaging partner Textware, print media partner Daily FT, and all our corporate partners, Asiata Digital Labs, Lanka Bell, LK Domain Registry, Luna Labs, Orel IT, Sarva, and Zillion. Once again, thank you all and especially final thanks to all the audience that has been with us today. I'm sure you all have enjoyed this session, and we look forward to any questions that you may have, as well as if you need any technical support with regards to meetings, you can always contact FITIS. And I know we have a whole host of experts and consultants who can help you with this. So please feel free to get back to us. And I wish you all a great weekend and have a good day. Thank you so much.